All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started on our Friday Torg live chat for the Kickstarter. I am joined this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, or evening even, with Deanna Gilbert, our resident boy forum master and writer and many, many other odd jobs, which we'll go into. And Alida Saxon, who is our resident map maker artist and helps with the art. Um, gosh, she's an art director. So
There you go.
I've already screwed up all the titles, so off to a great start. So I want to start. We don't have visuals on Alida, but she's got her desktop up to show some art as we go on. So if you guys have got requests, questions, and stuff, throw them in the chat room. We'll try and make sure we cover it. But I want to give Alida a chance to introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and some of the cool stuff that we may have seen you working on.
Well, I'm an art director for Sigil and assistant art director for Pinnacle. And I've been doing work on art in general for a couple decades, and since I guess about 2008 for RPGs and such. And this is where I'm at today.
Cool. So, like, what's the most awesome project that you've done art for, not counting Torg?
Well, I think the Savage Worlds projects have definitely been a standout. You know, just seeing it develop, over the years. I was, working with the new version, and we did the revival of the early Deadlands where we recolored it and, reproduced it. That was fun.
Oh yeah, that had to be a hell of a project to work on.
That was a huge project, reviving the old art, bringing it up to the present, and but still honoring the original material.
Yeah, that was my favorite part about that book because I've got the old ones and the line art, and I like personally I love line art. Like
Yeah,
I'm the type that when those comic book collections, the like essentials used to come out, where they like wouldn't have the color, or they would just have the old inks. I
yeah.
loved those because I love the line art. But in a full color RPG book, it looks weird, and yeah, so it was really cool that you guys recolored all of those.
Well, I think we both all with the when color would have been prohibitive, if not impossible, RPGs, and I think they really made it stand out.
Yeah. All right. Cool. We are also joined. Yeah, we're also joined by Deanna. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Deanna, and tell everybody what you do.
So I'm Deanna Gilbert. I am been on the design team almost since the beginning, and I guess I'm the continuity guru, lore guru, keeper of the lore. But I'm also the Torg community manager, so I'm pretty active on the forums and can be blamed for most errata.
Yeah. So when we say continuity girl, what that really means, everyone, is I call Deanna like the canary in the mine shaft. Because whenever I propose like some ridiculous idea, if Deanna goes "Ah!" and falls over dead, I know I've gone too far.
I think the reason why it works so well is that both of us have no problem saying no to each
No.
other.
Oh, let's see here. Someone asks, I've got a question. When's this handsome man named Michael going to work with you next? Which Michael? There's so many handsome Michaels I know. You guys are going to have to be more specific. um, so let's go ahead and jump in. So before we get into some of the other questions, Alida, you were you're you and Aaron are both art directors for Torg. I want to take a couple minutes to like describe to people like what that actually means, because it's like it's a title and you're like, oh, you direct art. We're like, what? Like, what do you do as an art director?
Well, it really starts with getting the orders of what you want to have in your books and the various products, and sorting it all out, and then going through our roster of artists to see what best fits for the project. It's a lot more paperwork than you think. Certainly more than I expected before I became an art director, because I started out, obviously just straight in art, and I spent a lot more time in email than I would have expected.
Right. And yeah, and so, and basically what happens, what our process is when we're writing the book, at certain points along it, we're doing like art notes, like, oh, this would probably be a good place to show a dark fortress. Like, go ahead and bring up the dark fortress one, just so we've got like a cool image for people rather than the desktop. And we'd put a note in like, oh, it's gonna look like, look kind of like the tower from Time Bandits, as a reference, and have mentions of that, and then you poor art directors get this like 3-sentence terrible note from some writer who has no idea how art works. It's like, yeah, could you make sure to have the tower in there? But I also want to see that there's 20 people on it, and here's what all 20 of them are doing. And you're going to have to show it from 2 miles away, but make sure that you can see that they're all holding this special kind of sword. And
problem. And gotta say, Google Image is my best friend.
And then the art director then takes that mess and says, no, you can't have all that. You got to focus on one thing. Or, hey, we have no idea what the background of this is supposed to be. Like, we got this tower. What's happening behind it? Like, oh, right. All the stuff that we non-artists don't think about.
Yeah, there's that. You sort of have to reach across that bridge for, with text you can leave a lot up to people's imagination, but when it comes to art, you're kind of saying this is what it looks like. Yeah. And you could forget things like time of day, weather, even the color of the rocks. I mean, you look at the picture of the Dark Tower, and how different would you be if they thought, Norway as a reference instead?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Cool. And then the other kind of interesting thing about that is, so then you get that, and you've got to decide, you've got this pool of artists working for you at Sigil. You've got to assign what artist is going to best match that image's style, and then go coordinate with them, and then get it back, and then we've got to be like, oh no, that's totally wrong. That's exactly what you said it should be.
For example, this one's done by John, and he's really phenomenal with environments. He's my go-to guy when I can get him for bringing together both the environment, like as far as nature goes, and man-made structures, or in some cases, monster-made structures. So I definitely have artists that have their strengths that I really like to go to, and it will my choices.
Yeah. Yeah, and if people are following along in the books, you can see that most of the artists, it's actually a pretty it's mostly the same names in there. So even though the style seems to change from book to book to book, there's only maybe 1 or 2 like new people each time, and 1 or 2 that we've phased out. So
yeah,
we're trying to keep it consistent.
Yeah, just more available, at the time of production, because we can only hold production up so much to wait on people. So
cool.
artists.
Yeah, so we've got an interesting question in the chat, which I'm going to jump to that instead of some of our other ones. What's the most challenging thing about working on the Kickstarter-backed archetypes? Can you bring up the Nile backers, and we can show some of those images off because they came out great. Yeah, I think it'll be. Yeah, I think it's illustration. Yeah, there we go. I can't remember if the backers are in there. They've got their own subfolder at the top left. And I think these, for the Nile Empire, these came out so freaking good. Love all of them. And so I can talk a little bit about our process, before it gets to art, as the person has their idea for a character. And when we start working on that character with them in terms of their stats and description and all that, one of the things that I stress when I ask them to describe the character is not just what they're wearing, but the attitude of the character that we want the pose to convey. Like, oh, is this, like, are they in action? Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they questioning?
Or sly, or
yeah, like something that's gonna come through and tell us who this person is. And then the other thing is, like, what are they holding? Like, is it a pistol? Is it a rifle? Do they have like a deck of cards? Like some other accessory? And like a few people really go crazy with it. Go ahead and do the actor with his cat. And we try and tell people, like, hey, one character, but it always comes up like somebody's got an animal sidekick, and we're like, all right, fine, we'll add the sidekick. But this guy went through a bunch of revisions, and he came out really cool because the original notion for him was basically we wanted kind of a Jason Momoa type who'd become a masked hero in the Nile Empire. And so the original, we had the sort of longer Jason Momoa hair, but then we added the cat motif mask. And one of the last little details to go in on this one was Jason Momoa had worn his wife's hair scrunchie on his wrist at some red carpet event. And so if you look on his gauntlet, we added the scrunchie to this one. So little details like that.
Yeah, Alida, do we have the refs for this?
Yeah, we should. Let's pull back.
Oh gosh, yeah, that'll all be in the don't go there. No.
Too much sausage making.
Too much sausage making. Yeah, but yeah, they go through a lot of revisions, and if we're lucky, like first hit is it, and if we're unlucky, then that poor artist, we're going back to him 6-8 times.
Yeah, well, like for example, the trap freighter came through really easily right after shot.
Yeah, one shot. Yeah, we had to do a little more. One of the ones we needed to do a little more back and forth on was there was the lizard rocket was one, but the motorcycle. Oh yeah, the mysterious lady, yeah.
Yeah, getting the right colors, the dress, the expression.
Yeah, and what was interesting is that backer, his wife is an illustrator, and so she did her own take on the character that we could kind of base it on. Like we still did our own to keep all the styles consistent, but but
definitely the anime manga influence, but tweaking it to match with what we're going on.
Right. Yeah, this one was one we had to. There was a discovery process. Like we knew he was a masked rider on a motorcycle, but we're like, where does the motorcycle land? Like, should it be Nile Empire's 1930s style? And we actually discovered the B theme later. Like at first I had a more like the 1980s Galactica Viper helmets, because I thought that would be a good cross section between motorcycle rider and Egyptian theme, and that didn't really work. And then we discovered the bee theme, and all the rest of the details then just kind of fell into place. All right, Michael says.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know what you're going for until you actually start seeing the pencils come down.
Yeah. I mean, and we try to avoid that because it's hard on the artist, but I mean, sometimes it is what it is. Let's see here. Next, Michael says, next time I see Shane, tell him I said hi. I absolutely will. I should see him after Gen Con. So, let's see here. All right, cool. Let's go back to our base questions. So the top one, you can go back to maps because we're going to be talking about Stella. This was a great question that we got in the update or the updates, which is, does the art team do any serious investigation into the Stella locations when placing them on the world maps? And this is going to devolve quickly into what that process actually looks like. But
yeah, I think Deanna will have to take over on this one because I definitely take her lead on this.
It's pretty much all my fault. Yeah, Alida really just does where I put the marks on a Google map, pretty much. I'm sure I infuriate her sometimes when I accidentally break one of our rules and we need to redo a huge section of India. But yeah, honestly, there's not a lot of thought put into specific locations of the Stella. It's more once I might start an area, like I figured I wanted, for say Abaddon, put the triangle around that, and then I sort of build out from there.
right.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, so when we approach this, we're approaching it like a High Lord would.
Yeah.
Where it's like we know where their Maelstrom Bridge is. We know we want their Stella borders to be out from that. Yeah. And we also know we need to cover this landmass in zones that are going to collect as much energy as they can. So it's less about where the specific Stella are landing. It's more about where our general zones are hitting so that we're getting coverage and not,
And there is a grand map that displays what territories the High Lords agreed that they would divvy up the Earth the way they would do that. Yeah. Admittedly, that map has changed slightly, but not substantially.
Well, and in my mind, that map is still what the map was. It's just that some things didn't work out quite the way High Lords wanted it to.
Yeah.
Mostly around Tharkold. Thanks, Tharkold.
Yeah, Tharkold was a mess, especially. I mean, it wasn't so bad doing the day 90 stuff, but once we figured out what was happening with Tharkold and having like the 3 different people wanting to be High Lords and basically competing to expand the realm, then it just kind of went wah, and it is hard, especially when you look at that mess around Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, of having to have Stellae within. I mean, obviously within the 500 kilometers is pretty easy, but Stellae can only connect to 6 different ones, and once you hit that, it won't connect anymore, and so you actually end up with a couple of gaps. Like there's one near just northeast of St. Petersburg that just they couldn't fill it in. It just wasn't possible. And unfortunately, some of these zones are tiny, and part of it's because the High Lords didn't want to, go ahead and make these large mixed zones. They wanted to.
Yeah, mixed zones are terrible for them, so they want to avoid them. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I like that. What's cool for us anyway is story comes out of that, right? Yeah. Because it's like, oh yeah, like they're a mess. Like they had bad planning for a lot of their Stella drops, and now they're backed against a wall. They're like, I can't actually put a Stella here or I have to put a non-efficient one in that gives me this small crappy zone. So I expended all this energy making a Stella that's not getting me much back just to be able to expand somewhere else. But now I'm up against the cyber papacy, so I'm not going to get any return on that investment unless I go into their territory, and take it, or make this horrible mixed zone that's going to jack both of us up. But whatever, suck it up, cyber pope. Like that's just how it is. and what's fun is like that kind of drives some of the stuff that we do in year 2, because it's like, wow, like that just works out. Like, yes, that's a mess. We're feeling the same thing that the High Lords are, and that kind of drives how their relationships go.
Yeah. And some of the zones, I mean, ironically enough, the cyber papacy map is going to be slightly different than the one that we did in the beta preview. And then the reason we said it was going to be previews is because we didn't know if there would be a good reason to change maps for story purposes or for other reasons. Yeah. One of which is I'm going to Buenos Aires in October. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we like having stuff when people have been there. And so I'm like, we should just add Buenos Aires to the cyber base. So we are. Yeah. But the only Stella, there is one Stella that I specifically placed, and that was an Aurora Stella on the summit of Mount Everest, because the Gauntman's just that area.
And there were a few in Isle that I had you nudge so they'd land on islands, things like that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, but it wasn't a specific thing. It was more to include in the territory.
Yeah. And so
there's no like landmarks or stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I wanted to do, like this is, and we could still do someday, but this is something that what I really wanted to do was have like a Stella hunt. Because the real world is a weird place, right? And like somewhere within a couple miles of these locations, there are probably real sites that look straight out of a game. Like, oh man, that rock looks just like a Living Land Stella. Or, there's this like weird warehouse out in the middle of nowhere with nothing else around it. It's like there's a Stella inside that. Like, what I really wanted to do was have people do like photo hunts and be like, I found the Stella, and then we'd like attach them to each one and give like the exact geocache location for it, because say it's a weird world. Stuff is out there, like if you look for it. So we might still do that. It's just not going to happen anytime soon, because it turns out that stuff's complicated. Now, and so one other thing worth mentioning is people ask, like, are we going to do the latitude and longitude for these? It's like, we got a Google map and we shared it. It's linked on the website, so you can zoom all the way in and see, and we say, hey, these are best guess. They're like within kind of a kilometer of this, or a couple kilometers of this. So, but you can kind of get the rough area from that, including latitude, longitude. So in a lot of ways we've got it more zoomed in than the old maps. Something I'm on the hook for is we've got the day 90 everyone map, and we've got the day 1 everyone map. I think I still have to go through the painful process of creating the day 360 everything map. I don't have to do that until we've got all of the books done, the year 1 books, so I've got some time. But man, that's going to be painful to do. Oh, hate that one. Because it requires data manipulation. Because when Deanna does them, she's got to do them all in individual sections, and then I've got to export the KML data, and then write a little code thing that puts those all together, and then re-import that in where they're together. And then I do that layered on top of the day 90 and the day 1 map, so you can toggle between them as different layers. Should be cool, but Sucks.
A lot of work.
And
Not the
meanwhile,
most intuitive.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
and actually, that's one thing. It is not easy placing these stelae because they have to be within 500 kilometers, and I'm pretty sure I managed to get that in most circumstances.
yeah,
But I mean, if there is one that's off, it's an accident.
yeah.
I really kind of tried to make sure that there was nothing in the middle, but there was a lot of placing it and then drawing the rulers to make sure that you've got the connections within 500 kilometers, and if not, then you have to move it, and then you have to try it again. And that's why I didn't bother with worrying exactly where the stone was dropped.
Yeah. Well, the other fun part is like we had a lot of mixed zones that were not planned, but then you look at the map and you're like, oh yeah, those are close enough. Those totally hit. So, well, what a mess. And then when you get done with all those files, you send them to Alida. And Alida, what do you do to make it these nice, beautiful maps that we see in the books?
Sorcery.
Yeah. Well, it's a mixture of vector for the stelae and the lines, and a map in Photoshop, and I sort of squish the two together as much as possible. So updates are a little bit scary, but I get a more consistent, that crisp look to it by combining the two.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's definitely got a distinctive look to the
Yeah,
Stella
we're
maps.
trying to go for something that didn't feel old, didn't feel futuristic, just sort of somewhere that sort of wandered in the middle. We went through quite a few versions of getting what the base map would look like. So let's see if I got anything up. Yeah, I got the most recent zones we did for this upcoming book.
Yeah. Cool. And here's one thing that I will never agree with: that the pure zones are clear. Eh. I know why we did it, but I still think that's the worst decision ever. They should have been darker, not lighter, because then when you pull the Stella and it's clear again, you're like, well, no, it's not a pure zone. Come on. But
yeah, there's definitely some trade-offs we had to do just for be able to actually see something underneath.
I mean that's why, right? Like that's exactly why. It's like, okay, I get it. Practical concerns, but
Yeah.
cool. So let's go to number 2, Alida. What was the most challenging piece of art you had to work on? And that can be both as an artist and as an art director.
I think I'd have to say the GM screens. You're trying to get something that's essentially 3 pages of art,
Yeah.
cohesive across it. You don't put somebody's head in the seam. And get enough people in there that you got interest, but you don't end up with just this mess. To some degree, I'll let the artist sort of see what they can do. It's like I was really impressed with the artist who did the Nile one.
Oh yeah, it came out great.
He packed a ton in there.
Can you bring up the
That was awesome.
can you bring up the Isle one, the rough?
Yeah, let's see if I can find that.
Because we haven't really zoomed in on that one because we've just got the rough right now. But I love it. I think it came out so dynamic.
There we go.
That's Nile, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And we always try to do like each of the 3 panels, we kind of want to have its own story, and it's usually heroes fighting something on one panel, like the Gospog on another panel, and then other villains on the third panel, and making like this huge like crazy action scene out of it. That worked pretty good for Living Land. work great here. And we mixed that up a little bit with the Isle one, where it's more of a like a scroll story, but
Yeah, we've only got a partial on that one since the artist is still working on it, but let's
Yeah.
see what I've got. Mm. Well, I'll say while I'm doing this is that, yeah, definitely the GM screens would be the hardest. Easily, funny enough, the covers are usually the easiest.
oh man, the covers came out great this time. Oh,
Oh, they're just gorgeous.
those are both Aaron Riley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, oh. Like,
I think I swore because I was so happy when I saw them.
Yeah, he does so much of the work for Pinnacle cover as well. So he's definitely great for those.
You gonna laugh at Thoria now? Are you?
Yeah.
It's gonna come right down your face.
Yeah, well, and something else that people are probably noticing is that we're definitely cousins with Pinnacle. Shane was a strong component, the leader for Torg Eternity, and so there's a lot of crossover between what we do here and what they do there, and we're all kind of this tightly knit family. So the borders between Pinnacle and Ulisses for Torg are we're a mixed zone to be sure. Oh yeah, there it is. Cool. I love that. Like,
Oh, I haven't seen this yet.
oh yeah,
This actually just came into me, I want to say last night.
nice.
So we're not quite there yet, but we got the heroes in solid.
Hey, look, Aiden's on model.
Yeah. Surprisingly hard to get him on Molly. You wouldn't think it'd be hard for, you got this young white dude right there.
We joke because like when we do the back and forth with the artists, like I tend to give a ton of leeway, right? Because I'm not an artist, but I have done just enough art to know like everyone's got their own style and their own take on things, and you want to give them the room to do that. But sometimes you'll get something where you're like, that's just not right. Like Aiden should be more handsome, has sharper features, da 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 da.
Or not quite that old.
Yeah, too old.
Problem.
Yeah, exactly. He's a young guy. So like you have that like, oh, like I always feel bad like kicking something back. I love the like just how dynamic all the action in that is. And I like that we've just got Aiden off doing his own thing instead of fighting. And we had a cool question come in where the artist was like, oh, can the Gospog be that dynamic? Because they're like, reaching up and,
Right.
and all that.
I think the question I asked is, are they kind of like fast zombies or slow zombies?
Yeah. And fast zombies, everyone. they're scary. They can do all that. They can jump. They'll come right at you. But I love this screen. I love how all the screens have come out, and they've all been challenging in their own unique way, both on the outside and the inside, trying to make them worth it. Because one of the decisions early on we had to make was, do we do a GM screen for each cosm? Is that something people are gonna want, or something that people are gonna be like, ugh, And so we've tried very hard to make them worth it, because we know they're kind of like an optional add-on. Oh, they got like that Gospog in the corner. Love him. That guy in the front. But we try really hard to make it worth it, to where we're like, I don't know if I need another GM screen. And then you get it and you're like, that's pretty cool. Okay. All right. I kind of like it, so. Because what we didn't want to do, and what one of my challenges has been, if we do it for one cosm, we want to do it for the others. Because I'm an OCD collector type, and I'd be like, well, I got a Living Land GM screen. Like, we were going to do that. We have the art. we have all these unique tables for it. Well, where's my GM screen for the Nile Empire then? Like, come on, you know.
Yeah. It's always frustrating when, like, for collecting books or whatever, and the format changes on you.
Yep, and that's
What do you shelf?
yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is we wanted to keep all the style and binding completely consistent through year one. Year two, anything goes, everyone. Like that's where we'll mix it up and apply some of the production lessons that we've learned, like as we go. Like you'll see year two be a little bit different, but everything within year two will be consistent within itself.
Yeah, and one thing that just occurred to me is when talking about doing the art orders, I found that my art orders, generally speaking, would have required a GM screen width for everything to actually happen. And so Darrell would keep, no, you got to focus on one, like two people, maximum,
Yeah.
and in the foreground, and yeah, so.
Yeah, there's been a few times where you go, guys, that's an army.
And you can do an army, you just have to do it at scale. You can't have detail, you know.
I make good posters. I'll just say that.
Yeah, right. And so yeah, like there's a few rules of thumb that help you do art orders. One, your best case scenario is focus on two characters. Either two people going against each other or two people doing something. You can have three, but like make sure like the focus, like you know what the two of them are doing. Second thing is make sure they're doing something. Like I don't want a piece of art with them just standing there, kind of like, "Yep, I'm here. Congratulations, me." It's like
this is Vogue magazine. We're trying to show the action.
yeah, they're doing something. If they're not, it doesn't have to be fighting. Like it could be reading a map, it could be whatever, but you actually have to tell the artist what the hell they're doing. Three, actually name the characters because we get a lot of, oh, there's Storm Knights doing this. And it's like, well, which ones? We've got like 80 now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really a good thing because it's sort of because different Storm Knights are going to change the story.
Well, right, but don't put that on the artist.
Oh yes, no.
Because the artist doesn't know, right? Like they're like, I don't know, I'll pick that guy and that guy, and you're just like, oh no, you know. And that's effort that they shouldn't have to put in, you know.
Right.
But then, you know, and then they're like, yeah, the next thing is set the scene. More than anything, they want to know, like, you want to know the tone. So, like, what I tend to do is even more than weather or something like that, I'll be like, we want this to be evoking action or mystery or whatever, and that's going to answer some of the questions about the weather. It's
well, like for example, the Nile was very appropriate to get sort of that pulpy shadow.
Yeah.
To it, the old pulp magazine.
Yeah, very noir. Yeah.
Yeah, almost movie studio feel to it.
Yeah. And then the last thing is some people when they do the art orders, they've got like that description dialed in. It's like a half a page where they're like, and the left hand's doing this and the right hand's this and the angle should be this. I actually try not to do that because I want the artist to have the freedom to express it their way. Like
yeah, but you don't get any surprise that way. Sometimes you can get a horrible surprise. You can get some great stuff. Well, actually, there's one piece I'll pull up that I was really impressed with what he did. Well, this is one here.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
That was like, I didn't envision that ship quite like that at all, but it's awesome. This is Ross Grams did that.
Yeah. And what's best is that is what I envisioned it like, so I was super happy how it came out.
Awesome. Let's see. This is one of our new guys.
Yeah. Brian Snake Lady.
Oh, this is another great one.
Oh yeah. When we talk about favorites, this one's gonna come up. Talons.
Yeah, I gotta say that's one of my favorites from the recent run.
Right. With the mage killers and the burning library, and it was one of those. It was kind of interesting because normally the cyber witch has got her cyber glasses on, and Talon asked like, can we leave those off? And I had to think about that. I'm like, ooh man, like do we want it to be a thing? Like we've got some stuff like that with Quinn where like he's always got his hat on, and someone asked could they have the hat not on, and the only one that I allowed it was the one where he's taken like 4 wounds and it's knocked his hat off, you know. And it was the same. I was like, oh, are we like that with Viola and the glasses? I'm like, nah, I don't think we care.
The interesting thing is that given what I've done for the Cyber Papacy book, it makes perfect sense that she's not wearing the glasses.
Because she's an Isle, why would you wear them?
Not the Cyber Papacy.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Well, and the cool thing about Talon is he's the guy that'll notice details like that because he's super into Torg. Yeah. So, like, if I know Talon's getting it, I'll put even less effort into describing stuff than anyone else is like, look, he already knows what this looks like. He's seen it. This is a good segue into favorite pieces of art. We were asked favorite pieces of art. This is one of my favorites from this wave, absolutely bar none. I think this is some of the best. Brian says
I would say that from the Nile ones, one of my favorites. The one I just showed was the Manjet.
Yeah.
It's really hard to pick because you'll get some great stuff coming in. I mean, we got a great team out of Yen and Unique working together.
Oh yeah, their archetypes just knock me out. Yeah.
Keep them consistent between. Okay, actually, example of one of Yen's pencils.
Love this character.
Have here.
This is one of my favorite characters. You know, when everything came in, I was so happy with how she looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah. And this is what I really wanted, like, what I really wanted for the Isle archetypes was we wanted to compete, we want to evoke and compete with the kinds of things that you would see in Pathfinder, right? Because I think they've got these really cool looking archetypes, they've got this evocative style, and I wanted to make sure that ours, like, really came out like that. They're just iconic, right? Like, I want to play that character. I mean,
I think it's also having that cohesive band of archetypes you can explore. I mean, who would behave this way when they're removed from their native cosm into something that's just completely alien to them, and you explore that in the storytelling of the images.
Yeah. And I love the just archetypes in general. They just give people that hook. Like, oh, that's what I can be? Cool. Greg added, for Torg flavor, I love the heroes descending into the tunnel and going past the Burger Barn sign. Yep.
That was another great one from Fallon.
Yep. Oh, I love the Necromancer. She was probably here's the thing with favorites, you guys. Like, everyone that's like almost everyone she's gonna pull up, I'll be like, oh wait, no, that's my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just too much good.
Yeah, the archetypes came out great. The covers, both the covers, the Caradon one, the Uthorian one, I was just like, man, that's it. Like, that says Isle. That says everything about Isle that we wanted to. You know, it's actually evocative in color scheme of the original Isle cover, but the original Isle cover has got like these kind of gnomes just standing there looking around like, what? And you're like, huh? Whereas this one's got like Uthorian, he's in action, there's a tank, so you can see that we're in the realm of Isle. Like, we're fighting, British troops, and still the Arcane Castle in the background. It's like, Love
Yeah,
it.
and it shows how powerful he is because the mere fact that he thinks he can defeat a tank with a sword.
Oh yeah, he can totally take it.
Yeah.
I stole that image wholesale because that was originally I had that description for Baraka smacking down a tank, in the Living Land because that was part of our Baraka's no joke push. like he can totally take a tank, and I'm like, oh, Thorian can too. Like he's got the tool set for it.
Here's the initial rough for that piece.
Yeah. Say I love the like how dynamic it is.
Yeah.
The mixture of fantasy and modern. Like I really think that just says this is Isle. Like. And the other thing I should mention for favorites is, so especially early on, and I'm gonna throw back a little. Oh, there's that cover. Yeah, the hardest thing I ever had to do for art was back with the original when we decided we were going to do full color art for all the cards. And I was the guy that got to do the art order for all like 200 freaking cards. Ermagerd, and I'm trying to be forward thinking and think like, okay, I want each of these pieces of art to relate to adventures we could do later on. So like it would be appropriate, like A, they're going to inspire adventures, and B, when we do adventures, I'll be able, like, we got to use this on something other than just the card. Mm-hmm. And man, I didn't hit 100%, but I hit enough that, like I'm really proud of how that came out. And then for favorites, Gunship Revolution, who did so much of the art on the original, and they got super busy because they're really awesome. So we still get a couple pieces from them every wave, but not nearly as much as we used to. But what I loved about them was when I was doing those 200, some of my ideas were pretty weak. Like, okay, after 100 of them, I'm kind of like, and now they do this. Okay. They saved some of those images. Like the descriptions were so weak, and then what came back from Gunship was so awesome. It was just like, oh my god, like this was terrible on paper. You made this an amazing dynamic image. Those are some of my personal favorites, and just their style knocked me out.
Early cards.
Yeah, way early.
Yeah, it was a challenge getting the number of people we'd need to get all those cards. So we really had to look for a team, that could work well together. And that's how it ended up working out so well, is because, Gunship's got their crew, and it could just pump up our options.
And one thing too is that just seeing the dragon there is that sometimes getting the art then informs the rules, because I don't think we'd ever planned to have a dragon that big in the game. And I actually asked Darrell, I said, did you realize how big that dragon is? It's huge.
I'm like, well, no, so it's it's really big, don't get me wrong, but the rubble makes it look a little bigger than it actually. All right, yeah, it's huge. All right, fine. Great dragon goes in the book.
Actually, we previewed that, but it's the one that's going in the book, assuming Darrell didn't edit it in the last pass.
Big assumption.
It's substantially different than the preview is, and it's going to be. I'll be interested to see what the feedback is from it, because it's a little bit different.
I haven't gotten to it yet. That's actually later today. I'll be finishing the last portions of that. So here's a question that, yes, for Greg, I love the Heroes Descending. Okay, we got that one. We're actually almost out of time, but I want to get this question in. This is one that I wanted to ask. So for the combat maps, and Alida, this is kind of your specialty. You do the maps, especially like the encounter maps and stuff. how do you approach the trade-off that can come up between like architectural realism and like having a fun map where there's places to go and stuff like that? Like, how do you approach that?
Well, I tend to start with the most accurate to reality as possible. You know, informing myself via maps or historical maps, stuff like that. And then I decide from there, well, how can I break it down, reduce things to make it interesting, or just, you know, purge details that can make room for something a little more dynamic.
Right. Space to do things, you know.
Yeah, actually, I'll show you that this is like the rough I was given for the overgrown street in New Lands.
Which I'll admit, I totally did that rough. I'm super proud of it.
I love getting stuff like this because it gives me a shortcut to what kind of feel you want, and then here's the...
Yeah, and what I was trying to do with those was make sure there were elements to interact with. You know, like the log between the two that you cross over, and, you know, the cars that are going to be cover, and the pool at the top that someone might find some way to use. Like all these elements that we want on there that could come up, you know, and make little stories of their own.
Yeah, so this is like an example of one of my partway things.
Yeah.
So I'm establishing where the buildings are, all the boring details. You know, I need these trees there to make this possible, so that characters can go from one, you know, building to the next and stuff like that. And then I apart from there.
Yeah. And the broken glass in the windows, all the texture for that.
Yeah. And that brings me to the final piece, where you've ripped apart a good bit of the buildings underneath. But until you get those bones in there, you don't know how and where you can break it.
And I love how those maps came out so much. I mean, they're so useful for any post-apocalyptic campaign,
right.
not just the Living Land, but also for Living Land. It was like that was the one that made us do the maps, because there just really wasn't anything that quite fit. And so you
have the mix of the modern deteriorated and taken over by the jungle.
Yeah, but
this is probably one of my favorite of the maps that came up. It was quite a job to get it right.
Yeah, there was a lot that went into that one. It's the broken highway overpass, I think, is my favorite too, because again, there's just details all over it that are really cool and invite stories. And like our challenge with Nile was, because that's actually an area that we've got decent coverage on. Like there are lots of, you know, Egyptian temples and things like that. So what do we want to focus on for these maps that hasn't been covered before? Like, well, okay, make it more of a dig site, you know, where it's all ruins and tents and things like that, just like you'd see in an Indiana Jones movie. All right, cool. Movie studio. That's one you don't see every day. The nightclub. Like, this is a classic thing, and it's something we're going to be using all over the place. And we had a similar challenge with Isle, because it's like, it's fantasy. There's hundreds of maps for this. What do we do? What do we need to cover for Isle that hasn't been covered? And we're like, well, the subway turning into a dungeon. That's going to come up in games like constantly. There's not a mixture map like that. And then the Giant's Causeway, which is one of those things, like, I don't think I've seen that as a map anywhere.
Yeah,
I have seen it in a video game.
On that one was an interesting task.
Fortunately,
there wasn't a lot of drone photography that would give me an idea of how it looked from the top down, so that was a little more challenging than I expected.
Yeah, it's a tough map, but it came out so beautiful. You know. Okay, we are starting to run up against our time limit, so I'm gonna do last calls or anything. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with, Alida? Stuff that, you know, shout outs, like anything part of your job that you want to mention to everyone while you got their attention?
Ooh, I'm on the spot now. I think basically I just like really enjoy seeing the style of all of the cosms and wrapping them into. I'm curious to see ahead what's going to happen with, like, say, the cyber papacy. It's so going to be so than what we've done for it.
Yeah.
Or the art coming up, you know. So keeping focused on getting the stuff done now and looking ahead, you know.
And there's a lot. Like we've got this kind of endless, round table now. Like boom, 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 boom for the next one, for the next one, for the next one. Oh, now we need some stuff for relics of power. Oh, now we need some stuff for this web thing. Now wait, back to the cyber papacy. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly keeping the artists on their toes.
Cool.
I know. At the same time, I've got artists that really like certain genre, and I was like, oh, I gotta get in touch with this guy, see if he's interested in doing some of the more the tech type things.
Yeah, cyber papacy needs more neon. We've got a couple of music videos we can point to now and say this. Cool. Deanna, any parting shots?
Well, I guess it's just as a writer, it's pretty cool having an image in your mind and then actually seeing somebody do something with that. And sometimes it's really cool because it matches what you envision. Like the Nile Empire sourcebook cover is pretty close to how I really wanted it to be, but there's still elements that I didn't even think of, like the little sorceress kind of shield that Mobius was using. But sometimes, yeah, I just had this vague idea on occasion. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head right now, but I just wanted it to be something and then just say cool, make it cool, and then they would.
Yeah.
And that's just awesome.
Cool. My parting shots are, this is the last of our sort of regular live chats. We're going to do one more. It's going to start up an hour before the end of the Kickstarter. There's going to be no agenda, no pre-done questions for it. We're just going to be hanging out, all punch drunk and loopy and ready for things to end. If everything works out according to plan, we'll be sending the links to backers during that live chat right after it closes, and we all cheer and applaud and all that. So hopefully, and there's one other thing. I almost forgot to do this. So speaking of art, I'm going to steal the screen for myself here so we can show this off. Oops. Let's see here. I want... okay. I can't do it, so I don't know how.
Which one are you looking for?
Well, physically, I got the dice rolling trays prototypes in. So there's the Uthorian one, which came out so cool. Here's the Living Land one that hasn't unlocked yet, but knock on wood, we think will. I'm sad that it's like a little teeny picture. Like I'm sure it's very easy for me to take over the screen and do that, but I don't know how. But at any rate, ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, Aaron Riley's art, so good. All right, thank you all for coming out for this one. We'll have the recording up on YouTube just like before. Last one's our hangout, which is going to be an hour before the Kickstarter ends, and we'll see you all there. Thanks, Storm Knights.
Bye.
Bye.